Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining the Oxford University Italian Society live talks. This evening, we host the founders of influential Italian podcast MadeIT, Ines Macula and Camilla Scasellati Sforzolini. Good evening, everyone.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Thank you for having us.
MadeIT is a young and influential Italian podcast on Italian businesses which have affirmed the Italian excellence in their sectors. In the last few months, MadeIT has become Apple's number one entrepreneurship and second business podcast. This evening, we will meet its founders, Ines and Camilla, who will tell us more about their ambitious project and their careers. After 10 to 15 minutes of questions by our committee, MadeIT will answer your questions. So please feel free to leave them below and I will read them out to them. So to start off, Camilla and Ines, could you please tell us more about your podcast, perhaps its origins and how you decided to launch it?
Of course, thanks so much, Giuliano, for the great introductions, and hi, everyone. So as Giuliano said, we founded a podcast called MadeIT. We founded it just less than a year ago in June 2020, helped a little bit by the pandemic because both Ines and I have full-time jobs and we're doing this as a passion project, but we're seeing great growth, and maybe we can talk a bit more if you guys have questions about the world of podcasting in general, but it's definitely a growing trend in Italy especially. We've seen a lot of new podcasts come out in 2020, and both Ines and I are podcast enthusiasts. We listen to a lot of them and we see a lot of potential for this new media going forward. But to bring it back to MadeIT and our sort of idea and how we first thought about it was really a podcast to promote Italian talent. Both Ines and I, like many of you, studied in the UK. We lived between London and the US for 10 years. And we hadn't been back in Italy for that whole time. And we felt like we were getting a little bit estranged from our country. And we wanted to do something to promote Italy. And we were talking at dinner and we realized there's so much talent in Italy. Italians excel in everything they do, not only around the world, but in Italy. And we wanted to bring some positive conversation about Italy because, as you guys all know, often the rhetoric around Italy is non funziona niente, nothing works, people have to leave Italy, you can't find anything that's successful in Italy. And we wanted to challenge that idea. And we thought about doing it in a podcast because, as I said, we loved podcasts and we saw a lot of potential. And so we came up with the idea of launching a podcast where we would interview we interview especially Italian entrepreneurs, but generally successful Italians in any field. And as I said, we sort of gravitated in the world of entrepreneurship because there's a lot of young talent. And that's where Italy shows its best colors. It's in like all the young people that are doing incredible things and that are really challenging the sort of usual path that is put before them and are doing new things. And yeah, so that's how it started. That's our mission, and it's going really well. We were able to speak to a lot of great entrepreneurs. Both Ines and I were so positively surprised by the caliber of people we were able to talk to and how many amazing young people there are. We're just about to launch our third season on Monday with a great guest. And we counted the number of people we've interviewed and will interview, and we have enough interviews to get us through July. So it's insane how many people there are out there that are doing incredible things, and we have new ideas every day, and there isn't enough time to do them all. So it's great to see like all this Italian talent everywhere. But yeah, and sorry, I spoke for a long time. I don't know if I missed anything.
No, I think you said it all. I mean, another important thing for us was to do this in Italian and not in English, because there are so many resources for English-speaking people. And I feel we wanted to reach to every single Italian person. And so it was really important for us to do it in Italian, interview Italians in Italian.
Yeah, and that made me think about one thing that if you guys listen already or will listen to the podcast, what we're really trying to bring is we're trying to tell a story, right? We're telling the story of those Italian entrepreneurs, and we're trying to inspire young people who are at university, or even honestly, we hope to get to high schoolers as well, to show them that there is another way, that there are so many ways to be successful, that everyone didn't know what they wanted to do when they were in school, and everyone struggled at one point or the other. And then you can see the people who really have grit and resilience and are convinced that their ideas or their talent sort of break through. So we're trying to bring this positive mindset even in the sort of personal growth and professional growth category. So hopefully a positive podcast all around in terms of message.
Thank you so much for this introduction. I was very interested in what Camilla was mentioning before, which is your focus, the focus of your podcast. Of course, we have seen that on Apple Podcasts you're placed very, very highly in for business and entrepreneurship. So could you please tell us more about these two sectors, and why do you think your audience is following you in those areas rather than others?
So I think, well, first of all, there's only a few limited amount of actually sections that you can tick on Apple. I think personal growth would have been a really great one, to be honest, because our stories really inspire people beyond just business and entrepreneurship, but you can only pick two. But I think we were really inspired by the podcast, How I Built This by Guy Raz. He only focuses on interviewing American entrepreneurs, but we wanted to bring that aspect, not just to entrepreneurs, but also people with amazing talent. I think with entrepreneurs, the amazing thing is that you can be an entrepreneur in so many different ways. Like it doesn't seclude you in just one specific area. You know, if you are a lawyer and you open your own cabinet, you're a sort of entrepreneur. You know, there's just the spectrum of things that you can do is so big. But and then business, because most of the people that we interview actually have a business and they're selling things, although we've interviewed people in social impact, doing social impact and things like that. But I would say, I don't know, Cami, if you wanted to add anything about on business and entrepreneurship.
Yeah, we didn't want to be pigeonholed in the entrepreneurship category. When we started, our list included like mathematicians who won the Fields Medal, cooks, artists, musicians, sportsmen. We want to really reach as many people as possible, but entrepreneurship is such an interesting category because it's very young, and we really want to speak to young people because we think we want to have a current conversation. We want to show people that this is happening right now. You know, it's hard to model your career on someone who grew, who sort of had their like career launch in the 90s, and like the world has changed so much that we want to bring like a current model. So in the entrepreneurship space, you have so many young people who are redefining the conversation, and that's why we gravitated toward that world. But hopefully we can bring as many stories as possible and inspire as many people as possible in different fields.
Thank you very much. I think also with the Italian society, we try to do something similar, like not, as you said, not trying to put ourselves into a niche sector or something that not many people can relate to, but to places where people can be inspired from or can grow, as you said. And personal development, I think, can be a very interesting category for MadeIT. Perhaps in the future, someone at Apple is watching us and we perhaps create this new category.
Exactly.
You mentioned very quickly that your podcast has been very influential. It's inspiring young people to become better entrepreneurs, to perhaps improve their businesses. What has been, in your opinion, your strength to become such an influential podcast in a few months? And what would you suggest to emerging podcasts?
So I think our strength is that because both Camilla and I are literally unknown people, like we didn't have an audience of people that was following us that we could promote our podcast to. We really focused on creating the best possible content that we could. We really focused, okay, if we are going to do this and we're competing with people, you know, that are more influential than us, our interviews need to be the best possible. Our questions need to be beyond interesting, right? So we spend so much time looking at the questions and the interviews that were already out there of the people that we were interviewing, and really coming at it with a very different angle and questions that really would have helped us, if we were in a similar situation, understanding, what goes into the mindset of somebody who leaves his career in a high-paying job, and starts a company of his own. Like, we want to really get to a deep place of understanding about their mindset, how do they face challenges, how do they overcome it, because all those things can then be taken as learning and being applied to your life, regardless if you're an entrepreneur or not. So I think content was very important. And second, it was all very much word of mouth, because we started as a passion project. This is not a business. So we have asked our friends to talk about it on their LinkedIn and on their social channel. We ask all of our guests to also communicate it on their platform. But other than that, it's just been kind of a snowball effect of people kind of loving the content and then talking to other people about it. And then there's interviews that appeal to more people than others. So obviously, if you have a guest that is more recognizable and more famous, people will listen to it. And what's interesting though is that sometimes the most unknown people who have businesses that people don't know are actually the most interesting. But hopefully we get to a level where people understand the quality of our questions and the people is so high that regardless if you know him or not, it's an interesting story to hear. I would say those are the things. Like, we really focused on creating really great content, I would say.
Yeah. And also from the start, like we started as if this was going to become a famous podcast. We didn't and this is a bit of a, controversial advice for emerging podcasters. If any of you, we can talk more about podcasting, and maybe we'll do it a bit in the next question. But it's so easy to start a podcast. You really don't need much, but it's so easy to start a bad podcast, right? If you don't put a lot of effort into it and just try and see how it goes, but then the content lives on and you kind of leave a mark on your listeners. So I would say if you want to do something, do it well from the start. Like, of course, our first episode is not as good as the episodes we're doing now, and we keep improving and we're finding our groove, and it took a while to find the perfect format. So that's normal, but start as a pro if you want to have a good podcast. So that would be
consistent as well. It's not like you can post 3 interviews and then nothing for 4 months and then another one. It's like, if you're going to do it, then what we started in March, as in we created the podcast in March, we created the logo, we started interviewing, but then we released the first episode in June, because we wanted to have like 5 or 6 episodes that were lined up, so that, when we were starting, we were really starting. And I think that's an advice that if you want to do a podcast, but if you also want to do something on social media, if you want to open a YouTube account, anything where you're putting content out there, the number one thing is to be consistent with that content. Doesn't mean that we don't take a break once in a while, because we also needed to take a break because we were doing 1 episode per week and on top of our full-time job. But consistency, I think, is very important, and focusing on quality, even though you're going to always get better, but do something semi-pro is, on YouTube, you can find so many tips anyway. That's how we started. We didn't know anything about the podcasting world, and we just spent hours on YouTube.
That's very interesting. And just a very follow-up question. Do you have any specific or particular people that inspired you in your podcasts, or could you name anyone that you follow on YouTube that helped you develop your podcast?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier Guy Raz, who has the podcast How You Built This. It's one, I think, of the most listened podcast on every platform. It's really good, and he interviews the greatest American entrepreneurs, from Instagram to Twitter, Ben and Jerry's, Five Guys, like everyone. So we were definitely really inspired, and also he goes very deep into their lives and into their problems that are both professional and personal. So that's definitely one. I think Buzzsprout, in terms of getting skills for the podcast, Buzzsprout has a really good YouTube account where they explain everything from A to Z of how to start a podcast. There's also a book, if you're Italian, by Damiano Crognali, which is called Podcast, and it basically gives you so many tips. I wish we had found that book. Actually, it wasn't even out, but that book was great. We read it after we had launched, and we improved a lot based on some of his tips.
That's interesting that you had some Italian mentors and international mentors. I think it's always a very good combination to have both. And you were mentioning earlier on about your the way you lined up the events or your interviews in a way that you could have a structure and you could be consistent in your publishing. But in terms of skills, did you have any experience in editing audio tracks or post-production work, and what kind of software do you use?
Yeah, no, we had zero experience. So I'm the editor now, and I started from absolutely never having used a single anything. But I just sort of raised my hand and I was like, okay, I can do the editing because I don't know, I felt like I had time, and I thought I like the content part, so it helped me engage with the content a lot. And so we started from scratch. As Ines said, we watched a ton of YouTube videos. Actually, I will say not that many. It's very intuitive. I just watched a lot of YouTube videos to understand which was the better software. And I ended up going with a free software because it was a very scrappy project. Until this month, we spent maybe like €100 all in all to like launch and start the podcast. We did everything ourselves. Yeah. So we started with everything free. So there's a great free software called Audacity that you can download on PCs. Macs have GarageBand that you can use. I have never used it. I have a PC. So I used Audacity. I looked at a few things. I realized what was important. I charged the tracks on the first time, and I started like editing, cutting, and playing a little bit with the settings. And the more I worked on it, the more I found new things to do, and the more the audio quality improved. So don't be, I'm saying all of this to say, like, don't be discouraged by that part. It's easy. Anyone can do it. I did it. It's free. You can get a free software. You can then upgrade if you think you need more. Honestly, I felt great with Audacity all this time. So I don't even think you need to upgrade. But there are better softwares that are easier to use out there that you can pay like £19 a month for. But yeah. And now the new thing that we have, which we're really excited about, is we have a real editor. We have our first
sound editor
employee, our first employee of MadeIT
freelance
podcast. Freelance employee of MadeIT podcast, who's a young guy who's an audio editor, and that's his career, and that's what he studied, and he's helping us. With that. So hopefully we'll get better and better and better.
And I was also interested in you mentioned Audacity as a software, but in terms of tools, did you have to buy any microphone or any, I don't know, lighting?
I can show you. So we bought this microphone. It's called Rode NT, and it's a USB mic. It has a pop filter, which is important if you want good sound, and that's it. We have one each. I bought some headphones. All of this was recommended by Buzzsprout, but I bought some headphones to do
they
the
recommend
editing.
Everything to the
from Audio-Technica. Those are like £30. They're amazing headphones, and they're really comfortable if you spend like hours and hours in your headphones. And that's it. That's all we have.
I have now a sound wall that I got on Amazon again for like £50. It helps a little bit with the sound if you're in a big room, because one tip is to be in a small room, and for ideally the walls to not, how do you say?
You don't have to echo.
Yeah,
so.
If you have problems with echo, the best thing actually is we found this, another podcaster gave us this tip, is to put like a blanket over you and record like that. But because we interview people and we see each other on camera, it was a bit embarrassing, so we couldn't go that way. But if you have a podcast where you're the only one who talks, you can do weirder things.
That's interesting. So you basically have, let's say, a Skype call, but you also record the audio of the call, right?
So we used to do it on Zoom, and the reason why it's better to do it on Zoom than any other calling platform is it's very important to have, and now we're getting technical, but single audio tracks. So my voice has to be a track, Inez's voice has to be a second track, and our guest is a third track. And Zoom lets you do that. So we started that way, but it has something called loss audio. So it's not the top quality when you download it. And now we're recording in a podcaster platform called Zencaster, where you get the best quality audio for all the guests. And you just pay $20 a month for it. And yeah, that's helping us improve the quality, because of course, like, we are only on audio, so you need to have great quality when you listen to our content. But that's it. And then there are hosting platforms that you can choose. Maybe you can talk about that for a second.
Yeah. So basically what happens is when you first launch a podcast, it's quite technical. You obviously, the way you can do it, which is super easy, is that there are two main platforms. One is called Anchor. It's part of Spotify. And the other one is called Spreaker. And you upload your podcast in one of those platforms, and they link to Apple, Spotify, Google Play, and all the other places where, people listen to podcasts. So you upload it once, and they basically send it out to all those platforms. So that's a really great, that's something that we didn't know, actually. We thought we had to upload it, on every single different platform. So that's amazing. And you can see basically all of your statistics, your stats, and your data on one place, how many downloads there are per episode, and everything like that.
Sorry, we got to
nice. Very good tips. Very good tips. Hardware tips, software tips. That's nice. And now, I wanted to move more beyond just the podcast. We, in current times, we often see that the business world is dominated by men. How do you think your podcast may aid this sector to become more gender balanced? And in particular in Italy, how do you think your podcast may aid women-owned businesses to become more significant and more recognized in Italy?
So that's a great question, and one that we talk a lot about amongst ourselves. One of the first things we said even before launching, when we came up with a list of people we wanted to interview, we said we want this to be gender. We want there to be gender balance in our podcast. We want to make sure that we give fair space to women to talk about women-founded business, or even just women who have wonderful careers, because there isn't enough of that anywhere, but especially in Italy, where there tends to be a little bit still more of a patriarchal system, especially in the business world. This being said, I will be honest, we struggled. So we're struggling to achieve gender balance because I'm sure there are super talented women out there that we don't know, but we've had to really make a conscious effort to involve more and more women, because there are so many male-founded businesses out there, and there are not that many women in this world. And so sometimes it's hard to achieve balance, because you really have to go out of your way to make an effort. I think it's an important effort, and it's an important effort to us because we're women, and we want to make sure that we're doing something to, as you said, to sort of bring more awareness to women, female-led businesses. But it's hard. So it's been a challenge, more than I thought it would be.
But we also hope to inspire lots of women that listen to us, that they can do it too. We try to find another important thing where I think gender, at least my point of view on gender balance, is you want to do gender balance, but you don't just want to take any woman that's doing something just because you need a woman. No, you want it to be a very similar high level. So, and that's where we struggle, because when you get to very, very high levels, there are many, many less women. But the good thing is, with this network that we have in our community that we're creating with MadeIT, we get so many people who are mentioning people that we don't necessarily know. And after the episode that we released on Monday, where we mentioned how important it was for us to interview women, we got a lot of people mentioning, women that because we don't know, every woman in the world who's Italian and who's doing well in their lives. So it's great to have our community who shares other names and things like that. But we definitely hope that through the interviews, it makes more women want to do something big with their career.
That's very interesting. It's one of our goals, as well as Italian society, try to make a more gender balanced project where really women can have their space and can be recognized as they should, because often, even as you mentioned, it's very hard to get some guests to come and interview them, but mostly because the world about interviews is also dominated mostly by men. So the fact that they can't see other women being interviewed in a way discourage them from being interviewed. So I don't know if I'm clear, but I think we really need to work on, and hopefully with MadeIT and the Italian society, we can try to give our contribution to this cause. And speaking of which, who's in your wishes list in terms of women guests that you would like to have on MadeIT?
Ooh, many. We Bebe Vio, which you guys interviewed, is definitely on our wish list. I think we have the founder of Giallo Zafferano, which is probably the website where we all find recipes to cook from.
We've lined up Giada Zhang, who's the founder of Mulan Group. She's having a lot of success at the moment in Italy delivering. She makes ready-made Chinese food that she distributes in supermarkets. We have
the space woman that you...
Yeah, Samantha Cristoforetti, who everyone knows, an astronaut. We also got some great suggestions from a listener. We want to interview this woman. And we love this too, is like women who do things that are typically seen as male-dominated. Yeah. So this woman who started a company that makes electronic motorbikes in Modena, in Motor Valley. And she's like the woman of Motor Valley, surrounded by men. So it's interesting to talk about, like, how do you make a mark in a world that's so male dominated? Lots of people, designers, even
Paola Zuccar, which is actually we didn't know, but she's like the manager of all the rap singers in Italy. Oh, nice. So like Fabri Fibra, Marrakesh, she's their manager, and she's a like super badass woman. We messaged her, but she hasn't responded yet, but we don't give up. we will get her. But also like Miuccia Prada. I mean, there's so many. There actually are a lot of women, but sometimes they're almost so high that we're still, we have to get a little bit more famous before they say yes. But we won't stop trying.
Hopefully, some of these are watching us now, so they will, please, you have been here, so please help.
No.
Yeah. Very interesting. And now moving on and changing chapters so we can leave space for our audience. We have understood a bit more about MadeIT and what you do. Could you please tell us now about yourselves? What do you do besides MadeIT? Are you all in the business sector as well in your full-time jobs?
Should I start? So basically, I started my career in 2012 at Estée Lauder company. So it's for those of you who don't know, it's a really huge cosmetic group. So Estée Lauder owns like MAC, Jo Malone, Clinique, Bobbi Brown, lots of cosmetics brand in the prestige category. And I started there as on a graduate program that lasted 2 years with 6 months rotations in different departments. And I basically worked for the group for 6 years, which was really amazing. I got to live in New York for 2 years as well with the company. And then basically at the end of 2018, I got a little bit tired of the corporate world. I'm somebody who has like lots of ideas. And when you're in the corporate world, you are like a tiny piece of a huge puzzle. And there's always somebody above you. And no matter how much you want to try and move things around, it's just super hard and very slow. And then that's why I think lots of the big old brands are really struggling at the moment to really be relevant, because everything takes them too long to approve. Instead, there's all these young indie brands that are doing very well because they can just, they have an idea, they execute immediately. So I got a little bit fed up and I was like, okay, this is the time I'm going to like take a risk. I can see my career here. I can see my future. It's a bit scary to see exactly where you're going to go. I was like, I need some excitement in my life and I need to do something different. So I left without really a plan. Like I was just like, you know what, let me just take a month to figure it out. And I wanted to enter the kind of entrepreneurial world, but I was a bit afraid that I didn't have the mindset. So I basically started, I created like a sort of little company, like an agency, where I help a lot of startups in the beauty world, both with their marketing and also their sales. So I help them launch their products into new stores in the UK, France, and Italy. So that's kind of what I do now. I also have an Instagram account where I give beauty tips. If you want to follow me, Ines Macula Beauty. And then I'll give it to Camila, who does something completely different.
Yeah, no, completely different. And that's why I think we're also quite complementary on this podcast adventure. So I work for a company called Sard Rabinin. It is a financial communications company. It's a bit of an unknown world, but I think one that's very interesting for people who like a lot of things, but they don't know what they like, which is very much me. So what I do is I'm a consultant, and I work for big companies, mainly sort of Fortune 500 publicly listed companies, and we help them with their communication strategies around specific events. So during what we do most is mergers and acquisitions. So I'm making an example, say Danone wants to buy Nestle, we'll do all the part that's like communicating why this deal is great for the company, relationship with investors, preparing the CEO to answer tough questions. And we also work a lot with the media. So sort of as a press office, just working with journalists to make sure that the merger is well understood. We also do a lot of crisis management. So if there's something that's going like awfully wrong at the company and they need to react quickly, we help them message and we help them deal with the crises. So it's all, it's very interesting because you get to see a lot of businesses. I don't have a sector specialty, so I work across different companies, different businesses, and you really see what it's like to be, well, you kind of work with the highest level of the companies, because often my clients are CEOs, CFOs, chief communications officers. So it's an interesting job, not one that's very well known. It has more of a standing in the UK, where there are lots of companies that do what we do. I work for an American company, but yeah, that's what I do.
So if you have a crisis, you go to Camila.
I can write anything. I'm an expert messenger, so I can take anything and write something very smart about it. Now that's my main skill.
Could we call it spin doctor?
Spin doctor, yeah, that's what they call it.
Okay, nice. And I'm also interested now that you told us more about your careers. What's your background, educational background? Where did you study? What did you study? And how did you get in your jobs? How, like, specific skills or experiences that you had?
Yeah, so I studied at UCL. I studied economics and geography. I had a passion for sustainable development, and that's sort of the course that I found gave me the skills to be in that world. I did a lot of internships in climate change communications when I was at university. After that, I went to the European Commission. I worked for a year there as a stagiaire because I really wanted to see the institutions world, the European institutions world. Decided it wasn't really for me, or I loved my experience, but it's sort of a beast. Living in Brussels is a beast of its own. I decided to go back to school. I went to do a master's in international economics and international affairs at Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies. That's how it's called. It's called SAIS. They have a campus in Bologna, Italy, which was really fun because it brought me home. I'm originally from Bologna, so it was very fun, although I grew up in Rome, but it was fun to be home with sort of my family, and then went to Washington, D.C. for a year. And after that, I wanted to get into public affairs, which is sort of what I do, but instead of investors, you speak to policymakers, but you use the same skills. I did a few internships in that world, and then I wanted to live in London. And as you guys all know, London is kind of the finance center of Europe. So I had to pivot a little bit my skills to that world, and I became like a corporate person, and that's how I got my job. And I started there 5 years ago, 5 years ago, so sort of after my master's.
And so Camilla and I went to the same high school in Rome, with the French high school. And then I went to study in London at King's College London, and I studied business management. So I knew that I hated studying. So I knew what I wanted to do. And I decided to do business because it opened lots of opportunities, and it was kind of a degree that works for lots of different jobs. But I always wanted to go into the luxury world. But before actually graduating, I was so sure that I was going to go in the fashion world. So I spent all my summers of universities doing fashion internships. But then I realized when I graduated that, sadly, actually, there's so many girls, especially that want to work in the fashion world, that you really get paid nothing, like seriously, like very, very low salaries. And also you are not really taken as seriously. I mean, this was my experience again. And also their career progression is not very like laid out, right? You could be an interning in lots of different fashion brands for so long. So somebody mentioned after I graduated the beauty world, which is something that I didn't even consider because I was so sure that I was going to go into fashion. And I did an interview at Estee Lauder, and the difference of like how serious it was compared to the fashion interviews that I was having, I was blown away already just from the interview. And I was like, okay, if this is how they interview and this is how they talk about career progression here, I'm interested in the product because I always wanted to be interested in the product. So I was like, okay, great. The product interests me because I'm a consumer, but also from a business standpoint, this is a career where it's very serious. It's much more businessy than what I thought. And I entered, and I basically discovered my passion once I started working, because I realized how makeup and beauty really helps you make people feel self-confident. So, and this happens to me in my daily life. If I put on makeup on a friend and she looks at herself in the mirror and she feels more beautiful, she's going to have that confidence to achieve much more incredible things. It could be going to a job interview and feeling confident. It could be going on a date and feeling, giving her best. So I love this aspect of beauty, and I love how emotional it is and making people feel good. So I always stayed in this world because I love it.
That's fascinating, and I guess we can see this in MadeIT because you come from two different backgrounds, and you can always bring very interesting insights, some more business related, more politics related, and I think it's definitely a strength, the fact that you come from two different backgrounds, and hopefully people that are listening to us, maybe we can inspire them to follow your paths, perhaps. And I don't have any other questions. I think it's better if I leave the floor to the audience, and we can always go back if we want to other questions. And let's start from Sara Carino, who was the first one to write us. She said, what kind of media impact do you wish to get with your project?
What kind of?
Media impact.
Media
impact.
Oh, sorry.
Well, I think our goal is at some point to become the podcast for business and entrepreneurship, but also we really want to start having an impact in younger people in schools, almost like if at school people would suggest to listen to this podcast to find out what you want to do in life. Because when you grow up, you see what your parents do, and you see a little bit now with obviously technology, you can see more things, but to understand what people do on their daily life, what their responsibility is, it just opens so many more doors of possibilities of things you can do. But we definitely want to just keep on growing and become like a household name in this kind of field, let's say. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I don't know what media impact
but
means.
let me know if we answer the question. If not, please rephrase maybe, and we will answer that.
Probably that was my mistake, because I translated from Italian, and she was asking about media impact and communication impact. Probably, I think you answered the question. I would say I think it's more kind of in general your objective. I think it works. And now this is Cecilia Corsini. Ciao Ines and Camilla, thank you very much for joining us tonight. After all the interviews you conducted for your podcast, could you identify a quality or skill that sets Italian entrepreneurs apart from their counterparts abroad? Is there something that Italians could learn from entrepreneurs in the UK, US?
We love this question.
Great question.
So the last question we ask in all of our interviews is, and I'm going to say in Italian and then we can translate, is in che modo la tua italianità ti ha aiutato nel tuo percorso, ha contribuito al tuo successo. So we really want to get to that. We want to find out through the podcast what makes Italians excel and what sort of distinguishes them from other people. We don't want to make generality like it. Of course, we go a little bit into stereotypes, but we really want to find that Italian, non so che that makes you shine. And we get so many interesting answers. People come at this question from every angle. I can maybe say a few of the things that we heard, but there's definitely a lot about problem solving. So the fact that maybe we haven't had it that easy because Italy is not the easiest place where to have success, or, the road ahead is a little bit, full of little obstacles that could be like bureaucracy or things moving slow or things not working, make amazing problem solvers. And it means that you get to a project and you're already ready for the fight. Like you're super dedicated, you're ready to like solve that challenge. And I think maybe people that have it a little bit easier don't have that grit and that resilience as strongly as Italians do.
Creative problem solvers.
Creative problem solver. A lot of creativity in general. If the businesses are in the arts, in a very general sense, anything that has some aesthetic to it, we grow up around beauty. And I think you realize that when you go other places. I'm not. But we grew up around beauty
Italians
and
beautiful
things.
The most beautiful country in the world. Yeah,
it's true.
I think
we grew up around beautiful architecture and taste and arts. And everywhere. We're like the Renaissance descendants, and I think we bring that to everything that we do. This way of seeing beauty and this like creative eye that we have,
and then we're more fun. There's one thing that I don't think that this is generalization. Italians get appreciated, worldwide. When you say you're Italian, people like their eyes become bright because they're like, they immediately think you're going to be fun, you're going to be talkative. I think we have a really good reputation for that.
And actually, this gets mentioned all the time to people. We interviewed this girl called Claudia Recchi. She's 22. She's Forbes 30 under 30 US. She started this incredible company after attending Georgetown University that helps a chatbot system that helps US students navigate the university system. And she said, she goes into a meeting with investors and she says she's Italian. And I thought, do people roll their eyes? And she was like, no, I get into a room, I speak to an investor, they love Italy. It's like connection made instant. And that helps you raise money. That's direct impact. So
connections. And to be honest, one thing in the world that is so important in succeeding in your career is the connections you make along the way. It's so important because if you're nice to people and people like you, they're going to introduce you to other people. They will do a favor to you because you're nice. And this is something where Italians really excel. And then the second part of the question is there something that Italians could learn from entrepreneurs in the UK and the US? I definitely think dreaming bigger. I think we limit a lot of it. Again, this is a generalization, but a lot of the business in Italy don't have huge goals. The goals of disrupting an industry. They have the goals of a lot of the time to create something that gives you a really nice salary and flexibility and being your own boss. And if that is the dream, that won't change society. That won't move society forward. And the thing with the US especially, but also the UK, is that the businesses that are getting built are all or nothing. People are putting everything. They're raising hundreds of millions of dollars. They really want to change an industry. And sometimes they succeed, sometimes they don't. And if they don't, sometimes they start again and again and again. And I think that that's something that they should definitely learn. Dreaming way bigger.
Learning how
to fail. And not being embarrassed by your failures. I was listening to this podcast, which was so interesting. And this girl was saying, if I don't fail on something every day, I don't feel like I'm progressing or learning because it means that I'm not pushing myself. And I think that this mentality, we don't have it at all. Even to do this at the beginning, we're like, oh my God, we're going to put ourselves out there. People are going to judge us. Are we going to be good at doing a podcast? Are people going to make fun of us? These are the questions that you ask yourself. Then you need to push through. At 29, we had the confidence to be like, whatever, people can judge us, who cares? But maybe at 21, you don't have that same confidence. So I think really embracing the fact that if you don't fail, you're just never going to get higher and higher.
That's a very nice answer. I think hopefully Cecilia will be happy, but I'm sure like it's very interesting. And now we move to Georgia. From the stories of Italian entrepreneurs, could you identify some common challenges that are typical of the Italian context? Mm-hmm. What would you change of the Italian institutional environment to stimulate entrepreneurship?
Oof, that's a tough question, and I don't know if we're super well placed to answer it because we're just learning about it as we go, and we do ask this question to a lot of our guests. So
definitely listen to
not a cop-out answer, but go listen to our podcast because that's where you hear people who are in this world who can give you the real answer. One thing that we see, definitely being part of a really small part of this entrepreneurship world, is then there needs to be more of a network effect. There needs to be more collaboration between entrepreneurs, venture capitals, media platforms, conferences, events. There has to be like
an ecosystem.
There has to be. It's getting built, and we see like Milan really like. There's so much happening in Milan at the moment around the world of entrepreneurship and startups, but there has to be more. It has to be everywhere in Italy. It has to become like a real revolution for it to be successful. Of course, at the political level, a lot of things could be made easier. One thing that everyone complains about is bureaucracy. You set up a company, you have to go to il notaio, and then you have to have employees, and then you have to have safety rules for employees, even if they work from home. Like there is
everything is difficult and complicated.
Everything is difficult, and so hopefully that will get streamlined as people have bigger and bigger conversations. But we see a lot of institutional money be put in funds that help young entrepreneurs start their companies, and I think that's great.
There's European grants where you don't have to pay back the money to start your own company. But yeah, the bureaucracy is unfortunately like something you've never seen before. I mean, I created my own. When I created my kind of business structure, I did it on the HMRC website. It took me about 5-10 minutes, and I paid £12. My sister, who's like trying to open up her company, I don't know how many meetings she had with the commercialista, which is, I don't know, the accountant. I don't know in English. You have to spend so much money up front, and then they want something, but you need to have a company before. Like nobody can understand the rules. And actually, one thing that a lot of people say is you almost need to employ right away an admin person that handles the bureaucracy, because imagine if you're the founder, and are you meant to be spending your time on dealing with these kind of things, or are you meant to spend the time building your company, right? And this is terrible actually, because to me, even that one day I want to go back to Italy, but it's generally like people are heroes who are doing it right now, because they face way more challenges up front than being in the US or in the UK. So let's hope things change.
Absolutely, yes. It's terrible, and now hopefully, as you were mentioning, the European Union is giving a lot of money to Italy for the recovery plan, and hopefully we will manage to thrive from this. Absolutely, yeah. And hopefully we can solve some of these issues. Two more questions for me. One is, what's in your bucket list? Do you see where do you see yourselves after the pandemic?
Well, after the pandemic, I mean, Cami, go for it. Start.
Well, I'm sort of rethinking my career. So I'm thinking about doing something different. I love my job, but thinking about making a change. Don't want to jinx it, so I'm not gonna. I mean, maybe going back to school.
She loves studying so much.
I love studying so much. So when Ina said I hate studying, I was like, I love studying. My best time was when I was at university. So enjoy it, guys. For you guys who are at Oxford, like take it all in. There's like so much. You won't have all this time to invest in yourself once you're out of there. So
that's true, though.
I wished I made more of it when I was at uni. But all to say, I might go back to school. I might move away from London. But on my bucket list is going on a trip. I miss traveling so much. I know we all do, but maybe going somewhere new.
Yeah, traveling is definitely high up on the bucket list for me as well. For me, I would say I think I've spent enough time with startups and consulting and kind of getting that mindset that I'm kind of ready for a next step of building. Obviously, focusing even more time on MadeIT because I love this project so much and I'm excited every day to work on it. But maybe something else as well. So stay tuned. I haven't started anything yet, but I have some ideas in mind of things that I want to really work on and get off the ground this year.
Nice. And do you have? This is my final question, and you told me what your final question was, and now I tell you mine. Do you have any fun facts or fun stories that have happened to you in during the podcast, during the making?
Oh yeah. So thank God, actually, a good tip on a podcast if you interview people is be two, because the great thing about being two is when the other person is having crazy like internet problems or like blackouts and things, there's the other person who can kind of lead on. So we were interviewing somebody quite important, and there were 3 blackouts in Rome, and Camilla went in and out of the interview quite a few times.
No, it's not even in Rome. It was my house just lost power, and you can hear my thing going like, "Oh mio Dio, what's going on?" And like and thankfully Ines was there to save the day. Then you miss half the recording, and you have a panic attack. You might not have everything on tape, but thankfully we had enough like safeguards that we were able to navigate those issues. But definitely the worst have been connection issues.
Once actually, so we both saved the episode after recording it, and I think once Camilla had these connection issues, so she hadn't recorded it, and it was only on mine. I had sent it to her on these links that expire after 7 days, and I thought she downloaded it, so I deleted it, and then a few months later we were like, okay, we need to post this episode. Where is it? Oh my God, we were super scared that we had to re-interview the guy, and we lost his interview. Thank God it was in the trash. I hadn't cleaned up my trash, so it was still there.
Yeah, but
what else have we had?
Fun facts.
Fun facts with the podcast, I would say, no, those were kind of the things.
Those
that
are like the bad
us.
things, but otherwise we're like, I don't know.
No, otherwise we've
no like big gaffes, asking the wrong question or like doing calling the person the wrong name. I don't know, none of those like crazy things. Thankfully it's been pretty smooth sailing.
Oh, actually there was one fun fact. I'm not going to mention names, but we wanted to interview a person. I'm not going to even mention the gender, and we found out that the person had blocked us on social media. And we were like, why was this person blocking on our personal accounts? So I decided I have a real personal account with my married last name that nobody knows. And I confronted her, her. But I'm not going to give a name, but I confronted her about it. I was like, why did you block us? Like, we really wanted to interview, like what's happening? And after a while, she actually responded, making up some really random excuse, but I was just like,
yeah, she thought we were copying her platform.
Her platform, but she doesn't have a podcast or anything. So we were just like, you can't talk about empowering women when you block.
She has a platform that empowers women, and we wanted to interview her, and she blocked us. So we were like, what about women empowerment? So there's a lot of.
So we challenged
her. We talk
about
that. Gender.
We challenged her on
stuff.
That.
Sometimes you see a lot of people who want to bring gender balance, but then they're not ready to like let other women shine.
Unfortunately,
and that's
there's
like
a lot
the
of
key
competition
part of
between women.
Helping women shine is if the people who have, not even at the top because we're not at the top, but if you have a space to talk about things, you don't give it to other women, then that's like, then you're defeating the purpose. And also women at the top in businesses have to do a lot more to help women at the bottom rise and shine and be role models. I spend a lot of time in my work at Start Ribbon and doing this. I started a thing called the Women Visibility Initiative that helps essentially if women themselves promote themselves more, because women are shy to promote themselves. And that's the difference with men as well. They never want to be in the spotlight. If they're not the expert, they feel like they couldn't talk about this. But if women start showing themselves more, it's going to help other women like rise by looking at role models. Sorry, I took it a bit in a different place. But, lots of challenges with like jealousy and competition a little bit.
I think competition is a good thing and is a healthy thing. So I think people need to, sometimes competition is a good thing because it means that the sector is growing. So you want to bring more people in. So I think being scared of competition is a very short-sighted thing, and sometimes women can be a little bit jealous of each other and not promote each other. But what we want to do is, regardless of, we even had this person, we weren't like, oh, we will never interview. We want to still interview this person, right? So, we still want to uplift other people doing not even similar, but like, career and personal growth things.
That's very fascinating.
Very fun fact.
We started from fun facts, and we ended up with very deep conversations about gender balance. That's important. I think it's part of the process. But that was my final question. Thank you so much, Ines and Camila, for joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for your questions. And you can please listen to our podcast, MadeIT.
Absolutely, guys.
On Apple or Spotify.
We have some internet connection. Speaking.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yes, sorry.
Oh, okay,
I was going to say, listen to the podcast. There you go. And then you can follow us on Instagram at madeit.podcast, and on our LinkedIn page. That's where we share tons of new interviews and news around the entrepreneurship world. So thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for your question, for your answers, and for answering our questions from the public. And hopefully we will manage to see each other in Oxford, when the circumstances will get better about the pandemic. And I also would like to say thank you to Emma Baldassari and Fabio Spagliardi, our secretary and IT officer, Cecilia Gorsini and Giorgia Ramazzotti, our press officers, and our sponsors for allowing us to continue our projects, in particular Banca Intesa. And finally, I would like to say thank you for joining us tonight, for asking questions, and please follow us on Facebook and Instagram. There are so many events coming up, some politicians, some economists, probably some astronauts, and hopefully another event with MadeIT. But until then, I wish you a very pleasant evening, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.
Bye. Thanks, Juliana.